A few students today asked about question 9 in the chapter 1 homework, so I'd like to take a look at that in this video. So this question is asking about the scientific method and trying to get us to think about how we could apply scientific method principles in just an everyday situation. So they give us a setup. It says during the first week of a new semester, consider that you have enrolled in 5 classes. Wow. Each of which meets 3 hours per week. For every 1 hour spent in class, a minimum of 1 hour is required to do assignments and exams. The student also works 20 hours a week, and it takes them an hour to commute to the job and back. On Friday nights, they like to socialize with their friends, and that they're fairly certain that they'll be able to successfully complete the semester with good grades. Show how the steps in the scientific method can predict the outcome of the semester. And so the assignment is, the question is right here. And it says, match each of the following statements concerning the semester with the correct step in the scientific method. So these are the steps of the scientific method, the 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are the statements that we're trying to match to the scientific method. So let's read the statements. So the 1, 2, 3, 4 is in order. We collect information, that's the 1. We formulate a hypothesis, that's 2. We plan to do an experiment and test the hypothesis, that's 3. And then we modify the hypothesis. So 1 through 4 are in order. But A, B, C, and D, which are the statements about the situation that the student is in, are not in order. We have to match them with 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's take a look and trying to understand what each thing is. So letter A says in the first 2 weeks of the semester, we keep a record of our performance in each class, including grades on homework, quizzes, and exams. All right. Step B, this includes the number of classes you have enrolled in, the amount of time you will give to each class, the number of hours required, the amount of time for social. So, okay. Letter C, if your grades in any class are not good, your idea was incorrect, it will be necessary to increase the amount of time. And letter D, you predict the amount of time you have allocated each week for class will be sufficient to result in good grades at the end of the semester. Okay, so what is the information we need to know? So what do we need to know to collect all the facts? Like before we even make a hypothesis, what do we need to know? So where are the facts? I think they're in letter B, right? So what we need to know is how many classes, how much time we're going to spend on each class, how many hours we're working, how many hours commuting, social, like sleeping, eating. We have to know, how do we spend our time? And so that's letter B, is describing that. We're collecting the information, including how much time we're going to spend in our classes. So then we need to know a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is how we think the answer should be. It's an educated guess. So we know how much time we're going to plan on spending on our classes. And so we're now going to predict what would happen. Like we know the situation. This is what I predict. And so I think it's letter D. So it says, if you predict the amount of time you have allocated for each week, you predict, not if. You predict the amount of time you have allocated each week for the classwork will be sufficient to result in good grades. So our hypothesis is we have allotted enough time that would result in good grades. Okay, that's what we think. When we look at our schedule, we look at what we have to do, the amount of time we're giving to classes should get good grades. And so how do we test that? So A or C, which one is saying that we're testing it? And I think it's A. So how would we test it? The first 2 weeks of the semester, we could keep a record of our performance. Are we turning assignments in on time? Are we doing well on quizzes or exams or labs or anything that we have to do? And so A would be a way that we would test that we were spending enough time. So what we would expect is if we're spending enough time, we should get good grades, and that will confirm our hypothesis. On the other hand, if we're not getting good grades, then we might not be spending enough time, and we'd have to modify our hypothesis, which would be letter C. If our grades in any class are not good, my idea was not correct, and it will be necessary for me to increase the amount of time allocated. So then I would have to revamp what I thought I was doing. And if you think about yourself as a student, you may have already gone through some thought processes like this. Like, how am I going to fit in the class? How much time do I have to study? And go through this. If you're not doing well, you might think, well, I need to increase my studying. So I think it's actually a very good example of how we can use the scientific method in our everyday lives. Now, if you continue to have questions or need more clarification, be sure to ask me when we meet again.